Hello bookworms! Today I'm going to be doing a video about my top 10 favorite villains. So I was lucky enough to be chosen to be part of the Renegades blog tour for Marissa Meyer's newest book that's coming out, entitled Renegades. I'm filming this before I have a copy of the arc that's being sent to me, so I may insert a little clip of the unboxing about now. Hi, Kristen from the future here to show you the unboxing of the Renegades box that I got from Fierce Reads, which I'm really excited about. First of all, it came in this giant, really cool box that looks like a board game box. I was pretty excited when I came home and saw this waiting for me. My box is a little bit bent, but that's okay. And then once you open it, just making sure nothing will fall out, it says choose your side, and on the left there are buttons that go along with the Renegades. So the Renegades are like the heroes of the book, and there are buttons that say bold, valiant, renegade, and loyal. Then in the center we have an arc of Renegades, and then on the right it says anarchists, and there are buttons for clever, anarchist, ruthless, and driven. I'm pretty excited about this. I cannot wait to read this book. I'm probably going to already have it read by the time this video comes out, but yeah, I just wanted to do this little unboxing clip. So now back to who my favorite villains are. So Renegades is a new sci-fi novel that's coming out, and it follows a group of renegades who are the people that overthrew all of these villains and took over in order to live in a world full of order and justice and to avoid chaos. So obviously the people that they overthrew are not pleased with them, and they are against all of these people who consider themselves to be renegades. And there is a girl named Nova who has a very strong issue with the Renegades, and she has an allegiance to this villain that is going to try to overthrow the Renegades. She meets a renegade who really is on her side, so there's a lot of conflict between how the story is going to go. As part of this blog tour, we were supposed to pick whether we would want to be a renegade or whether we would want to be an anarchist, and I chose to be on the anarchist side. I thought that would be really fun, especially considering that it is Marissa Meyer and she is really good at writing villains, so I feel like I will definitely sympathize with them. But anyway, I'm gonna get into my top 10 favorite villains in literature that I've read about thus far. And actually, so Renegades is coming out on November 7th in case you want to pick up your own copy, which I highly suggest. So the first villain that I'm going to talk about is Holland from the Shades of London series by Victoria Schwab. Holland is quite the villain. He is a very evil person. He does a lot of evil things, but his backstory definitely makes you feel sympathetic toward him. He is one of those villains that is really interesting to read about because of that backstory and because you feel a sympathy for him. I really enjoyed his character arc throughout the entire Shades of London series, and I definitely recommend reading this if you have not. Next on my list is actually a Marissa Meyer book, and it's Heartless. I really enjoyed reading the backstory of Cath, who becomes the Queen of Hearts in Alice in Wonderland. I thought that Marissa wrote an amazing backstory for her, and I just really loved all of the little things that made her who she was, like her obsession with baking, and you could tell like she had some villainous tendencies, but she was really pushed over the edge as this story progressed. And that's really what made her into the villain that she is, that we know in Alice in Wonderland. She was a really fun villain to read from because you were definitely rooting for her throughout this book as well. And I think that those villains are the best, the ones that you end up rooting for throughout the story. Next on my list, I want to talk about all of the poisoners in Three Dark Crowns. I think that they are such fun villains because they're always like having parties, and they were just by far the most interesting of all of the elemental like factions in this world. If there was a book that was like solely about the poisoners, I would definitely read that because I was the most invested in what was going on in their domain. I think that they're the ones that made this story interesting. The first chapter is actually about the poisoners, and that was really what drew me in, and then other parts I found to be a little bit on the slower side, but every time that the poisoners showed up, I was, again, my interest was totally piqued. The next villain I want to talk about is Amarantha from the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. The reason that I love Amarantha so much is because she's one of those villains that's just purely evil. There's really no backstory that makes you feel sympathetic toward her. Like, she's just, I mean, she has a backstory, but she's just a horrible person and she's fascinating. I really liked reading about her. I really would love if Sarah J. Maas would write some more about her character, even if she just wrote like a novella about her or something. I would absolutely read it because I found her to be fascinating. Next on my list are Victor and Eli from Vicious by Victoria Schwab. I am saying both of them because Vicious is really a story where you can't choose who is the villain and who is the hero. Both of them definitely have their faults, and they both have these powers and they both use them for not the best of things. I don't want to spoil anything, obviously, but both of these characters are so interesting, and I think it was really fun to see two characters that are villains, but villains in different ways, and have both of them be the main characters of the story. I think that was like just so perfectly done. Next on my list is Anna from Anna Dressed in Blood by Kendara Blake. Anna is a ghost that is haunting this house, and she is a teenager, and she also has a tragic backstory. I really loved Anna just because of the fear that she would instill in people, and there were so many teens that would try to go to this house to try to like catch a glimpse of Anna and the legend behind her, and she was ruthless, and just like the descriptions of her when she would appear on the page would always get me so excited. They were so beautifully written despite them being horrific, because she would be in this white gown that was soaked in blood and be like dripping blood, but it was sounded beautiful the way that it was written. So it was kind of like conflicting there, but I really enjoyed learning about her, and I really enjoyed just seeing the way that she would interact with other humans. Next, I want to talk about Queen Levana from Marissa Meyer's Lunar Chronicles series. Levana was one of the first villains in literature that I really took a strong liking to. Okay, so Marissa Meyer actually wrote a book called Fairest where she explored Levana's backstory, but I can 100% say that her backstory did not cause me to sympathize with her even a little bit. I think that Levana is an awful person, and I think despite things that have happened in her past, like, it's because she chose to be a terrible person. She could have very easily like turned around and been a good person, and she just is awful. So I really enjoyed reading about her motivations and just like enjoying how horrible she was. Like, obviously I was not rooting for her at all. I was definitely rooting for Cinder and crew, but I was really interested in Levana and scenes where she was one of those villains where I was kind of like, oh, I hate her, but like I love to hate her. She would come on the page, I would be like, oh, but I would also be like, yes, tell me more. So Levana definitely makes my list. The next villain I'm going to talk about is Henry Ironwood from The Passenger duology by Alexandra Bracken. He was another villain that was really horrible. He was on this manhunt to find this artifact from historical times in order to use it for his own benefit, and despite all of the consequences that would surface from him using this artifact, how it would affect everyone in the modern day, he did not care. He wanted to use this artifact for his for the betterment of his life and his choices. Henry is a villain that I definitely disliked very much, but I also found him to be rather interesting. I would have even loved to see a little bit more of him throughout the two books. He was definitely a character that made me want to learn more about the history and more about just time traveling and his story in general. Next on my list, I want to talk about the Lord Ruler from the Mistborn series. I really enjoyed him because he was very like cold and calculating, and he always seemed to be a couple of steps ahead of everyone, and I always enjoy characters that are like that are very in tune with the things that are going on around them, and very analytical and able to figure out and predict things that might potentially happen in the future. I thought that he was really fascinating. He, again, is another horrible character, but he's really interesting. And last on my list, I want to talk about the villain in the Archived series, but I'm not going to say who that villain is because that would be a spoiler, sadly. But this villain was so bad. So interesting, but so bad. Throughout the story, you have different feelings toward them. Sometimes they're warm feelings, sometimes they're not so warm feelings, but man, Victoria Schwab can really craft a villain. Now that I've done this video and talked about my top favorite villains, I'm realizing that this list largely consists of villains written by Victoria Schwab, Marissa Meyer, and Kendara Blake. So they seem to be like my go-to authors when I want good dynamic villains. If you haven't read the Archive series, I definitely definitely think that you should. I really loved these two books, and I wish that we were getting a third one, but I know that that's probably never gonna happen, so we'll just have to come to terms with that. So those are my top 10 favorite villains in literature. Let me know who some of your favorite villains are. Let me know if you are excited to read Renegades, which is coming out on November 7th. And also tell me if you would be a renegade or an anarchist. That's all that I have for this video, and I will see you guys soon in a new one. Bye!